A poor girl accidentally hit the luxury car of a millionaire CEO, but she never imagined he would be her true love. Before we start the story, leave a comment below telling us which city you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Alice was talking on the phone while crossing the street, pushing her cupcake cart, her apron stained with frosting. "I promise I'll be on time this time, Grandma," she said. "Just don't run, girl." Her grandmother's voice echoed through the phone. That's when Alice's delivery cart slipped off the curb and slammed into the shiny bumper of a parked luxury car. Cupcakes flew. Frosting splattered across the hood. The cart flipped over like it knew it had messed up. "No, no, no," she whispered, staring at the scene like it was happening in slow motion. The car door opened. A tall man in a sharp suit stepped out slowly, his face a mix of boredom and barely hidden annoyance. "You hit my car?" he asked, looking at the mess, then at her. "Technically, it was my delivery cart, and it was the wind's fault, and gravity, and maybe the uneven sidewalk. That's a Jaguar." He pointed at the car like it was a sacred monument. "Do you have any idea how much it costs to repaint a car like this?" "I do. It's more than I make in 2 months, but maybe we don't need to focus on that right now, okay?" He pulled out his phone and started dialing. "What are you doing?" Alice asked, trying to wipe the frosting off her hands onto her apron. "Calling the police?" "No." She jumped in front of him like she was in an action movie. "There's no need to bring the law into this. I have a better solution, and it's a lot sweeter." Thomas looked at her, still holding the phone. "I'm listening. You have 5 seconds. I can pay you in cupcakes." "In cupcakes?" "Yes, I run a coffee and sweets cart. Everyone loves it. Honestly, one lady canceled her divorce after eating my brownie. My coffee brings people back to life on Mondays." "This isn't a hospital," he replied flatly. "Then let's make a deal. I'll bring you coffee and cupcakes every day, personally, as compensation. And if you want, I can even put your face on a decorated cookie, or write 'sorry about the Jaguar' in caramel drizzle." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "You want to pay for the damage to a luxury car with sweets?" "They're not just sweets, they're taste experiences, edible emotions. And my coffee is good enough to fix your mood, which clearly had a crash today too." She gave him a big smile. He closed his eyes for a second, like he was asking the universe for patience. Then he looked at the car again. "And if I say no, then you'll be known as the CEO who had an innocent baker arrested and crushed the dream of an 83-year-old lady who just wanted to have tea and cupcakes in peace." He crossed his arms. "Emotional blackmail? I've got more." Alice raised her finger. "What if I told you that today is also my plant's birthday? It passed away last week, but I swore I'd honor its memory by being a better person. This agreement would be part of that." There was a brief silence. Thomas looked at Alice like she was a rare kind of person, the kind who walks into chaos and still cracks jokes. 7:30. Tomorrow, at Fisher Corp headquarters. 1 double mocha, 2 croissants, and a gluten-free muffin. Personally delivered. Was that a yes? That was a deal. And if you're late, the deal is off, and then I'll call the police. He started messing with his phone again. Delivered at 7:29. Got it. Alice grabbed a frosting-stained napkin and wrote everything down. "Oh, and just to confirm, do you want your muffin with fruit or with regrets?" "Fruit," he said, getting back into the car. Alice stood in the middle of the street, looking at the mess, the fallen cupcakes, and the crazy challenge she had just accepted. She took a bite of one of the surviving, slightly squished cupcakes and mumbled, "Alice, you just sold your dignity for a dented hood and a gluten-free muffin. Well done." Alice woke up feeling like she missed a flight to Paris. Only the flight was a double mocha, 2 croissants, and a gluten-free muffin, on its way to a grumpy billionaire's office with absolutely no sense of humor. Her alarm was playing the Mission Impossible theme, her sister's idea. It was 5:42 in the morning. Alice jumped out of bed, tripped over the neighbor's cat, which had snuck in through the window again, and landed face first on her food truck uniform shoes. Great start, Alice. First gravity, now an undercover Garfield. With a swollen eye and a coffee maker louder than a NASCAR engine, she began what she called Operation Caffeinated CEO. While she was kneading the croissant dough, she recited to herself, double mocha, 2 croissants, gluten-free muffin. Don't be late. Don't trip. Don't die. With the clock working against her, she packed everything into her thermal tray, taped her flour-covered apron together, and headed out with her coffee cart, which squeaked like it had bronchitis. The Fisher Corp building, right in the heart of Manhattan, looked like a temple made of glass and steel. It had more windows than she had friends on Facebook. As she got closer to the entrance, Alice felt like even the automatic doors were judging her worn-out sneakers. The lobby security guard was built like someone who mixed protein powder into his coffee. When she introduced herself, he looked at her like she was about to hand out pyramid scheme flyers. "I'm Thomas Fisher's official caffeine supplier," she said with a smile. "Here to keep him from eating his employees before 9. He didn't laugh. She was used to that. "ID? I've got a napkin with my name on it. Does that count?" Another deadly stare. He called the executive floor. "She's here, the one with the cart. Yeah. It's like a sitcom." He hung up. 32nd floor. Don't touch anything." "Not even the elevator?" she asked. He didn't answer. Alice stepped in and sighed as the elevator carried her up like a clumsy princess heading for the dragon's tower. On the executive floor, she was met by a receptionist who looked like she was built in too professional to smile mode. Her blazer was as tight as Thomas's patience the day before. Alice Oliveira, first official delivery of edible court-mandated compensation. The receptionist pointed with her chin toward the glass office next door, never taking her eyes off the screen. Alice took a deep breath, pushed the door open with her shoulder, both hands full with the tray, and stepped into the CEO's lair. Thomas sat behind a desk that probably had its own zip code. His laptop looked more expensive than her car. He didn't look up. "You're late." "It's 7:31, Mr. A. Fisher." "That still counts as 7:30 in 48 states. He ignored the joke. Alice set the items down on the desk with a flourish worthy of a Broadway waiter. A double mocha made with artisan beans, ground by hand, 2 blessedly crispy croissants, and 1 gluten-free muffin that cost me my soul and $16 in ingredients. Thomas took a sip of the coffee and bit into the croissant like he was reviewing a tax report. "It's edible." That was almost a compliment. "Are you okay? Should I call a doctor?" He didn't blink. "Bring the next delivery tomorrow, same time." "Any feedback? Yelp review? A wish for peace and light?" "Less talk, more punctuality." Alice rolled her eyes and headed out. At the door, she bumped into a giant vase in the reception area and nearly turned into a modern art sculpture made of coffee. On the second day, Alice arrived 2 minutes early. Thomas looked at his watch, then at her. "Still late." "You know what you need? A sympathy muffin. With leave me alone frosting." All week, the routine stayed the same. Alice showed up. Thomas barely spoke. She tried to make a joke. He chewed like a corporate robot. But slowly, something started to shift. On Wednesday, she handed him the muffin with a little note attached. "May contain traces of humor. Please alert us of any allergies." On Thursday, he returned the coffee cup with a sticky note. "No side effects. You may proceed." Alice was so excited she forgot her tray on the executive floor. By Friday, she was exhausted. Her grandmother had needed care overnight, her sister fought with her online boyfriend, and the neighbor's cat had thrown up inside her oven. Nothing was going right. "Here's your survival kit," she said as she walked into Thomas's office. "Includes mocha, croissants, muffin, and a delivery person in zombie mode." He looked at her with a slight frown. "You look disorganized. And you look like the villain in a legal drama. We make a good team." Thomas bit into the croissant and chewed in silence. Alice noticed a small photo on his desk. A blond boy with a dog. "Your son?" "My nephew. Lives with my sister in Seattle." Alice nodded. "He's cute. Looks like the kind of kid who likes marshmallows in his cereal." Thomas glanced at the muffin. "You talk too much, and you don't talk enough. But don't worry, I'm keeping track of everything you say. So far, I've got a total of 57 syllables." He didn't smile, but for the first time, he seemed almost intrigued. Later, as Alice left the building, she bumped into a man in a suit with an easy laugh. "Whoa, coffee with a jump scare?" she joked, trying to balance her tray. "You must be Thomas Fisher's famous walking caffeine." "He talked about me?" she asked, surprised. He said something like, "She's loud, dramatic, and insists on putting notes on the muffins, but she shows up on time, more or less. That's pretty much a love letter in Fisher-ese. Good luck. He's not as bad as he seems, just harder to figure out than a puzzle made of blank pieces. On Saturday, Alice decided to try something new. She brought a small personalized thermos with smiling cupcake drawings. On the label she wrote, "Daily dose of human tolerance. Shake well before socializing." When she handed it over, Thomas looked at the label in silence. "Worried I'll sue you for having too much personality? If you're gonna sue me, make it with caramel drizzle. It'll go with my record." He took a sip of the coffee, stayed silent. "It's not as sweet today," he said. "It reflects your soul, but I can make it sweeter tomorrow." Before she walked away, he mumbled, "Add a cheese roll on Monday." Her eyes went wide. "What? Was that a special request? Oh my gosh, you're evolving." He pretended not to hear, but she walked off, practically dancing with her tray. That night, sitting on the couch with her grandma, Alice thought out loud, "Grandma, Mr. Fisher asked for a cheese roll. That's practically his way of saying, good morning. If he ever asks for chocolate fudge, marry him." On Monday, she showed up with the cheese roll, a note on the napkin, and twice the enthusiasm. He ate everything without a word, but before she left he asked, "Are you always like this? Annoyingly charming?" "Yes. No. I meant persistent." Alice paused for a moment. "When it comes to muffins and grumpy billionaires, yes." He let out a short, muffled laugh. The first since the accident. She froze. "Wait, was that a laugh? Am I hearing things? Hello, security? Fisher has a fever." He just shook his head. "Get to work, Alice." And for the first time she left with a full smile. The deal was working, but not exactly how she expected. And maybe, just maybe, this wasn't just about paying off a debt. It was the start of a connection built on coffee, sarcasm, cheese rolls, and something she couldn't name yet. The Fisher Corp building was so fancy, Alice felt guilty just stepping into the lobby. It was like walking into a museum where every inch sparkled more than her entire paycheck. And now, she was a regular there. On her second visit, she tried to roll in with her coffee cart and tripped over the entrance rug. Thomas's cup flew straight onto the beige jacket of a man who turned out to be an international investor. "Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry. I've got napkins, baking soda, the spirit of a housekeeper, whatever you need." She blurted, panicked, trying to clean the stain. "Are you kidding me? This is coffee? Double mocha, organic beans. It stains, but it's premium." The man huffed and stormed off. Alice was left in the middle of the lobby, holding the empty cup and what was left of her dignity. The next day, she tried to take a shortcut through the hallways and accidentally walked into the security wing. She only realized when two guards with stern faces showed up. "Do you have clearance to be here?" "I have divine clearance to spread coffee and joy." "ID. I have a badge from the coffee shop and a loyalty card with 8 stamps." She was escorted back to the front desk by 2 large guards while employees watched, trying not to laugh. Of course, Thomas heard about it instantly. The coffee lady almost broke into the IT department, Becky, his assistant, said with amusement. He just muttered, "Pfft," while reading something on his tablet, but the moment she left the room, he quietly typed on his phone, "Becky, find out everything you can about Miss Alice Oliveira." Discreetly. Over the next few days, Alice was mistaken for an employee 3 times. A new intern saw her with the tray and said, "Hey, do you know where meeting room 4B is? I barely know where my own sanity is. So, you're from HR? I'm from coffee." Which is kind of like HR for emotions. While Alice kept racking up awkward moments in the city's fanciest building, Thomas watched from his glass office. He couldn't understand why that clumsy woman kept taking up space in his thoughts. Becky eventually handed him a short report. Lives in Queens, cares for her elderly grandmother and teenage sister alone, dropped out of college to support them, works 2 shifts, never late on rent, no legal issues. She's honest. Thomas didn't respond right away. He just stared at the screen. "And she still finds time to make filled croissants," he muttered. "Pardon?" "Nothing. Keep working." Friday night, and the Fisher Corp building was almost empty. Thomas was still working, as usual, and watching the city below while finishing reports. That's when he saw her. Alice was on the sidewalk in front of a fancy restaurant on the corner. She held a tray of coffee and looked clearly embarrassed. Across from her, a woman in a red dress was yelling loudly, "Do you really think I'm going to accept this? This garbage you call a latte? My dog has better taste than you." "Ma'am, the order came with caramel because that's what was on the ticket." I asked for no caramel. Are you stupid or just pretending? Alice lowered her eyes, trying to keep her voice steady. I'm sorry. I can replace it. No charge. Do you think I need charity? Look at you. You shouldn't even be here. People like you should be selling cheap stuff in the suburbs. The words hit Alice like a punch. Before she could respond, a new voice came from behind her. Are you sure you want to keep having this conversation in public? The woman in red turned around. Thomas Fisher stood there, flawless suit, cold stare, hands in his pockets. And who are you? She asked with a tone of disdain. The CEO of Fisher Corp. And the person who funds part of your investment portfolio, Mrs. Merritt. The woman's face went pale. I didn't know that. Well, now you do, and I tend to appreciate people who treat others with respect. You know, that helps with corporate image reports. Alice stood there in shock. The woman mumbled something and quickly walked into the restaurant. Silence. You were inside? Alice asked, still confused. I was in the building, saw it from the window, and decided to become a street hero? Let's just say I hate arrogant people, especially when they're picking on someone who doesn't deserve it. She took a deep breath, her eyes still wet. Thank you. I've heard things like that before, but not so publicly. Don't thank me. It was instinct. Alice looked at him. For the first time, she didn't just see the cold, calculated CEO. There was something else. A man who didn't tolerate injustice. A man who'd been watching from afar, but saw more than others did. She gave a slight smile. And here I thought you only knew how to criticize muffins. Don't make me regret it, he said, though there was a hint of a smile. Alice turned around with the tray in her hand. Before crossing the street, she looked back. Hey, Thomas? What? Thanks, really, for the classy rescue. He nodded slightly. As she walked away, he stayed there, watching, not admitting, even to himself, that something inside him had changed. And for the first time, Thomas Fisher found himself thinking that maybe, just maybe, life wasn't only about contracts and glass walls. Alice didn't know shame could last over 48 hours, but ever since Thomas stood up for her on that sidewalk, she'd been caught somewhere between confusion, embarrassment, and mild panic at the thought of running into him again. So when she got a call offering a last-minute catering gig at a gala event, she jumped at the chance. She needed the money, the distraction, and honestly, she wanted to prove to herself that she could be professional, even in places where she didn't quite feel she belonged. Custom dessert table for a corporate event, the woman on the phone repeated. Formal theme, high-end guests, nothing flashy. The company name? Tremont Events, but the event sponsored by Fisher Corp. Alice, without thinking too much, said yes. Only hours later did her brain make the connection. Fisher Corp. No way it's him. No. Must be another Fisher. Probably a cousin. There's always a cousin involved in these things. But the universe doesn't usually deal in hopeful guesses. On Friday night, Alice arrived with her boxes of desserts at the main hall of the Astoria Grand, a venue so luxurious the floor tiles seemed to glow on their own. As she arranged truffles and macarons, she heard over the sound system, "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Please welcome our host, Thomas Fisher." Alice froze. A spoon dropped to the floor. A waiter nearby raised an eyebrow. "Of course, because the world is small and irony is huge," she muttered. She turned slowly, just in time to see Thomas at the center of the stage. Impeccable suit, subtle smile, the kind of elegance she'd only seen in magazines. With each round of applause, Alice felt like her soul was quietly trying to slip out through the nearest exit. Breathe. You're a professional who's about to mess up the frosting from sheer nerves. She was trying to focus on the candy wrappers when she felt someone next to her. So it's you. Alice turned her head and came face to face with an elegant woman, hair pinned in a perfectly challenging bun. She held a champagne glass and looked at Alice like someone inspecting a cracked vase. "Excuse me? You're the woman who hit my son's car and now brings him coffee every day, aren't you?" Alice widened her eyes, surprised by the bluntness of the question. Well, yes, it was an accident, and the coffee part was my idea. A friendly agreement." The woman gave a half-smile, completely humorless. "Let me be clear. Don't even think about making a move on him. Don't try to win him over. You're very different from our world." Alice swallowed hard, trying to stay composed. "Ma'am, Madeline Fisher, mother of the man you're clearly holding out ridiculous hope for. I'm not no need to lie, I've seen this before. Sweet smiles, sad stories, thinking cupcakes can climb social ladders. Alice clenched her teeth. I'm not trying to climb anything. I'm here to work. Yes, I bring your son coffee with whipped cream, by the way, but that doesn't make me a national threat. This isn't a personal attack, dear. Just a fact. You don't belong in the same world. Alice felt her throat tighten, but she took a breath. The world I come from is full of people who think they're too important to notice the person serving them. I didn't come here to win anyone over. I came to deliver the best pastry in town. If that's offensive, maybe what you need is a little more sugar in your life. Madeline stared at her for a long moment. Then she turned with elegance and walked away like she was floating. Alice let out a slow breath. What a night, she muttered. Now all that's missing is the ceiling falling or me tripping over a violinist. Minutes later, she stepped behind the scenes to catch her breath. She needed air and emotional distance. She was staring at the wall, thinking about ditching the event and escaping through the kitchen when she heard a familiar voice. She talked to you, didn't she? Alice turned. Thomas was there, tie loosened, looking worried. My mother has a gift for turning words into sharp knives. It's impressive, if traumatizing. I'm sorry about her. I should have warned you. You knew she knew about me? I figured she'd find out. I just didn't think she'd come after you. Alice let out a dry laugh. You're different from our world. That was the line of the night. Beats the restaurant lady who called me a Brooklyn roach. Thomas ran a hand through his hair, clearly uncomfortable. I'm trying to keep her from interfering. But it's not easy. I'm not some charity project, Thomas. You don't have to fix anything. Just don't pull me into your world. I can't handle parties with invisible rules. Who says you have to follow invisible rules? Everyone who looks at me like I walked in through the wrong door. Silence. Then he spoke, more gently. Alice, I didn't ask you to come here, but I'm glad you did. Even with all of this, even with her. She crossed her arms, trying to keep a neutral face. Look, I liked you. You stayed quiet. But I like my peace even more. And your mom doesn't go well with that. Thomas let out a breath, almost a smile. I get it. I'll finish the table, then I'll disappear quietly. Don't worry, I won't stain Fisher Corp's reputation with cupcake frosting. Alice. She was already back at the table, focused, serious. Let's have a little fun for those who only read the comments. Type cupcake in the comments. Only those who made it this far will get it. Now let's keep going with the story. And he just stood there for a few seconds, watching how she kept going. Even with her pride wounded. How she never apologized for simply being herself. How her light was different. More human. More real. 2 days later, the sound of a black car at the end of the street made Alice look up as she swept the sidewalk in front of her little stand. Thomas Fisher. Again, this time in jeans and a t-shirt, sunglasses on and a coffee cup from somewhere else. Just to tease her, she guessed. Here to check out the competition? She said. I'm here to scout the neighborhood. Thinking of investing in a new commercial space, he said, trying to sound casual. Market research, or just a hidden urge to see the girl you traumatized at the fancy ball? He shrugged. Maybe both? She crossed her arms. You're terrible at lying, you know that? I'm great with contracts, and I'm not the type who pretends to care about commercial properties. Good to know, because here we only sell coffee, cookies, and uncomfortable truths. Thomas stepped closer, picked up a sample cookie from the table. Any discount for remorseful CEOs? Only if they ask nicely and wear jeans. He laughed, and for a moment the tension between them melted away, like sugar at the bottom of a cup. Alice didn't know what Thomas was looking for, but she knew one thing. His world might be different, but at that moment, on an ordinary sidewalk in an ordinary neighborhood, they were standing on the same ground. And maybe that was enough for now. Alice spent the next few days trying to pretend that meeting Thomas's mother had just been a bad dream, the kind you wake up from sweating and promise to forget. But it was hard to forget a woman who practically told you that you were a stain on her expensive velvet couch. Still, her pride kept her from stopping the deliveries. At 8 a.m, there she was, standing tall with her coffee cart, her courage, and a defiant little smile. Morning coffee for the CEO, with whipped cream just how the princes like it. Becky, the assistant, glanced at her, then at Thomas's closed office door, and whispered, "He seems different these days." "Different how?" Alice asked, adjusting the tray. "Less grumpy, more thoughtful. Yesterday, he even turned down 3 meetings and bought flowers." Alice choked on her own breath. "Flowers?" "Yes, roses. Red ones, a dozen." Alice didn't reply. She just stepped into the elevator, trying to hide the confusion in her mind. When she opened the office door, Thomas was there, sitting as usual, but this time, no suit. He wore a dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up and reading glasses. He looked more human, more approachable. "Your morning fuel," she said, placing the cup on his desk. He looked at the drink, then at her. "I liked your speech at the party." Alice raised an eyebrow. "The cupcakes aren't a national threat speech?" "Exactly. It was well said." "Great. Want me to print and frame it? Could go right next to your MBA." He laughed. A real laugh. "Do you always talk like this?" "Like what?" "Like every sentence is a little battle of sarcasm. I'm small, I have to make up for it with sharp words." Thomas smiled, but there was something else in his eyes. A weight. As if he were about to say something but changed his mind at the last second. Alice noticed. "What is it?" "I need to show you something." He picked up the projector remote and pointed it at the wall screen. "It's about a company project, a new social initiative we're building. And, well, it has everything to do with you." "With me?" "Yes. After that day at the restaurant and the party, I started thinking." Thomas clicked the remote, revealing slides titled Fisher Foundation, Program for Independent Women Entrepreneurs. Alice's eyes widened. "What? A support fund for self-employed women who face financial challenges but still keep their businesses running. The idea is to offer mentorship, startup capital, and logistical help. The first suggested name for the leadership role is yours." Alice went quiet. "You want me to run this?" "I want you to lead it the way it should be, with honesty, hard work, and real-life experience." She leaned back in her chair, still taking it all in. "Is this real?" "I've never been more serious." "Thomas, this changes everything." "It does. That's why I need you to think it through. But first, I need to be honest." Alice sat up straight. "What is it now?" Thomas hesitated, then got up and walked to the window. "I had you investigated." Silence. "What?" "When you started showing up here every day, I wanted to understand who this woman was that disrupted my routine. I asked Becky to look into you, and I read it all. Your background, your story, your life." Alice felt her stomach turn. "So all this, the flowers, the project, is it guilt or just a bored millionaire's curiosity?" "It's admiration, it's respect, it's something I can't even name yet, but it's not pity." She stayed silent, staring at the coffee cup that now felt like it weighed a ton. "I should be mad at you," she murmured. "Are you?" She took a deep breath. "I am, but also thankful. Not for the report, but for seeing me." Thomas took a step forward. "So, will you accept the project?" "That depends." "On what?" "I'm not sure I trust you yet, Thomas Fisher." He nodded, no pressure in his voice. "One step at a time, then." Alice stood up, picked up the empty cup, and turned to leave. Before she stepped out the door, she said without looking back, "But the fund idea, it's brilliant. And yes, I want to be part of it." From that day on, their connection began to take on new colors. Thomas started showing up at Alice's stand in Queens regularly. Always with silly excuses. "I'm just checking out the local business scene, pure market research." "Sure, and the croissant is just part of your risk analysis, right?" She began visiting the Fisher Corp headquarters not just with coffee, but with ideas, sketches, dreams, and their meetings started ending with laughter, inside jokes, and eventually long silences filled with meanings neither of them dared to name. One afternoon, Alice was helping her grandmother tend the small garden in front of their building when a black car pulled up. Thomas got out wearing dark jeans and a leather jacket. "I brought this," he said, lifting a box. "This what?" "Pancakes. Made by me. Found the recipe online." Alice's eyes widened. "You cooked? What kind of CEO do you think I am?" "The kind who prefers 5-star restaurants over frying pans." He handed her the box and looked at Alice's grandmother, who was sitting in a wheelchair with the sun on her face. "Are you the famous Mrs. Marlene?" "Depends. Famous for what?" "For having a granddaughter who can throw millionaire executives off balance." The lady laughed, and Thomas instantly earned a point. Alice invited him upstairs, and for the first time, he saw the small apartment where she lived with her grandmother and younger sister. Everything was simple, but clean, organized, and full of life. Photos on the walls, notes on the fridge, the smell of real food. Thomas stayed quiet, taking it all in. This felt more like home than any penthouse he'd ever owned. "You're awfully quiet," Alice said. "I'm impressed." With the mess, with how real it all feels, and how light. Her younger sister appeared in the hallway wearing a band t-shirt and a suspicious look. "Is this the coffee guy?" "This is Thomas," Alice replied. "The famous Thomas with the wrecked car?" He cleared his throat, a little embarrassed. "Is that an urban legend now?" "There's even a meme," Alice joked. "Great, just what my reputation needed." The three of them laughed, and Thomas felt that this sound was better than any applause at a board meeting. That night, when Alice walked him to the door, they stood quietly in the hallway for a moment. "Thanks for letting me in," he said. "It wasn't a favor. It was inevitable." Silence. "What if I want more than just meetings and projects?" Thomas finally asked. Alice looked at him. "You do?" "Yes." She took a deep breath and gave a slight smile. "Then you'll have to deal with your mother, your reputation, and my pride. I've always been good with challenges." She stepped back and said, "We'll see," and gently closed the door. Later, sitting alone in the living room, Alice looked at the coffee cup on the table. She remembered clearly the day it all began. The car accident, the fear, the ridiculous deal to bring coffee every day so she wouldn't get sued. Now, she was part of his life. And he, part of hers. But the world they lived in was still full of walls. And even though she didn't know what would come next, she was sure of one thing. No matter what happened, she wouldn't let anyone, not the past, not the pressure, erase the woman she was. What began as an accident now felt like a choice, and she would always choose the path that made her feel whole, even if that meant loving carefully. On Monday morning, the sun had barely come out when Alice opened the yellow notebook with crooked letters and started scribbling ideas. She was sitting on a bench near the cafe, still wearing her flour-dusted apron and with a head too full to think about baking. Thomas had said he wanted more. Not just the projects, but her. And somehow that no longer felt so far-fetched. But Alice knew. Feelings required more courage than any meeting in a glass-walled office. And she hadn't yet decided if she was ready for that. "Are you sketching croissants or making secret plans?" asked Camilla, her sister, showing up out of nowhere with a backpack and a juice in hand. "Trying to do both. It's a new kind of strategy." Camilla sat beside her, stretching her thin legs. "So, the handsome CEO showed up again?" "He has a name, Thomas." "Oh, sorry, Thomas then?" "And?" Alice didn't answer. She just gave a little smile, which was enough for Camilla to make a face. "If you fall for him, it's going to be like a soap opera mixed with Wall Street. If I fall for him, it'll be my problem, and probably my nervous system's too." Camilla laughed. "Just remember, handsome heirs can bring more headaches than bills." "Don't worry, I've got experience with both." A few minutes later, Alice was back at Fisher Corp with her trusty coffee cart. This time, along with the usual orders, she carried an envelope with 3 pages of notes for the social project. Ideas about mentorships, hands-on workshops, partnerships with small suppliers. When she got to Thomas's office, Becky stopped her before she could knock. "He's in a meeting with the board, but he said for you to wait, and he left this." Becky handed her a small package wrapped in gray paper. Alice looked at it curiously and, when she opened it, found a silver keychain with the letter A engraved on it, along with a handwritten note. "Just a reminder that you already have the key to unlock big things, T." She felt a sudden warmth in her face. She slipped the keychain into the pocket of her apron, like it was a jewel. 2 hours later, the office door opened and Thomas walked in, no tie, looking tired but alert. "Come on in." Alice followed him and handed over the envelope. He opened it carefully, going through the papers one by one. "This is more than I expected." "You thought of everything?" "Not everything. Just enough to show you I'm serious about this." He looked at her over the papers. "And so am I." They sat side by side, drafts spread out on the table, and started discussing the details. Ideas came and went. Suggestions turned into plans. "We could do workshops in underserved neighborhoods, with support from the foundation, and an online platform for sign-ups with help from employee volunteers. Think we can get partnerships with grocery chains? If you lead the project, I'll get the contacts. They were so involved they didn't notice the time. When Becky came in to say the day was ending, Thomas blinked like he'd just snapped out of a trance. It's 6 already? Yes. And you have dinner with investors at 7. Cancel it. Thomas, it's important. Then postpone it. I have another commitment tonight. Becky raised an eyebrow but said nothing as she left. Thomas turned to Alice. Would you have dinner with me? She frowned. Like, real dinner? With food and everything? Yes, and napkins, and maybe dessert. Alice hesitated, but the way he looked at her, like she was the center of something bigger, made any no vanish. All right, but only if dessert is cheesecake. They went to a small bistro in Brooklyn, far from the city buzz. The place was cozy, with dim lights, wooden tables, and the smell of basil in the air. They sat in a quiet corner by the window. Why this place? She asked. Because no one here knows me, and because, for the first time, I just want to be Thomas. Do you realize how romantic and dramatic that sounds at the same time? I'm trying a new style, sensitive CEO with a touch of lemon pie. Alice laughed. Over dinner, they talked about everything. Childhood, failures, favorite songs, unspoken fears. Thomas talked about the pressure of running an empire, about an absent father and a controlling mother. Alice spoke about the mom who left too soon, the strong-willed grandma, the rebellious sister. That's when Thomas reached across the table and took her hand. Alice, You throw me off balance. She smiled. Is that a good thing? I'm not sure yet, but it's real. Suddenly, a phone rang. His. Thomas looked at the screen and sighed. It's my mother. Are you going to answer? I should. Just 2 minutes. He stepped outside to take the call. Alice watched him through the window. His expression shifted as the conversation went on, sometimes cold, sometimes frustrated. At one point he ran a hand through his hair, clearly upset. When he came back, he looked more serious. Everything okay? She asked. She wants me to go to a meeting with Chinese investors tomorrow. And she wants me to bring the ideal candidate to present as my future fiancé. Alice tried not to show how that hit her. And are you going? No, I told her that. For the first time in a long while I said no. Wow. Yeah. Kind of freeing, kind of terrifying. She didn't say anything, just took the last bite of cheesecake. On the way back, Thomas drove her home. He stopped in front of her building and turned off the engine. Alice. Again, always. I don't know what this is turning into, but I know I don't want it to end. She stayed quiet for a moment. You're not used to hearing no, are you? Not really? Then maybe it's time you learn. Because, as much as I like this, I still don't know if I'm ready. He nodded, understanding. One step at a time? One step at a time. Before getting out of the car, she leaned in and gave him a quick kiss on the cheek. Good night, sensitive CEO, he smiled. Good night, miss. I like to mess with your life. Alice walked into the building, feeling like the ground was a little lighter under her feet. But outside, Thomas sat in the car for a few more minutes, staring at the door. He knew that from this point on, there was no turning back. The next morning, Alice woke up to a notification on her phone. New message. Thomas Fisher, our project was approved. Congrats, director. She read the text, then read it again, and only then realized she was grinning like a fool while her grandma, watching from the couch, gave her a suspicious look. Dreamed about cake, did you? Something like that, Grandma. Something like that. For the first time in a long while, her heart finally felt in sync with her dreams. It was a sunny Friday when Alice arrived at Fisher Corp headquarters for her first official meeting as director of the social project. No more coffee cart, no more aprons smelling like cinnamon. She wore a simple but elegant dark blue dress, and her hair was pinned back with a modest clip. For the first time, she was there as part of that world. Not as a visitor, but as someone who belonged. At the front desk, Becky greeted her with a genuine smile. Director Alice, Mr. Fisher asked that you head straight up. Still feels strange to hear that? Alice admitted, tightening her grip on her purse strap. You'll get used to it, or maybe not, but you'll do great either way. Alice smiled, grateful. In the elevator, the nerves started to kick in. It wasn't fear about the project, it was about what this new step meant. Thomas had crossed the line between personal and professional. And even with all the care and respect he showed, Alice's heart still moved cautiously. When the doors opened, Thomas was waiting for her. No suit. He wore dark jeans and a gray shirt with the sleeves rolled up, like he had chosen the look to appear effortlessly charming. And he was pulling it off. "Right on time," he said, stepping aside so she could enter. "I'm addicted to clocks, and to not getting fired before I even start." He laughed and pointed to the table where there were 2 cups of coffee and a folder with the project's name on the cover. New Beginnings. "I like the name," she said. "It was your idea. I found it in the footer of one of your drafts. It just felt right for everything we're trying to do." Alice flipped through the pages while he watched her. "You seem different today," she said, eyes still on the documents. "Different how?" "Less CEO, more human." "That's your fault. I've been spending more time in the real world lately." "Does that include stopping the analysis of croissants like they're stock market shares?" "No promises." She laughed, and the mood in the room lightened. The meeting was filled with energy. Thomas presented the approved budget, interested partners, and the initial launch dates. Alice suggested a community event in Queens as the kickoff, something symbolic and accessible. When everything was settled, he leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Now that we've covered all the business stuff, can I take you to lunch?" "Is that a real question or a corporate trick?" "Real question. I promise. No contracts, no spreadsheets." Alice hesitated for a second, then nodded. "All right, but I picked the place. Surprise me." She took him to a food truck tucked between 2 busy Brooklyn avenues. They sold spicy tacos and fresh juice, and the crowd was made up of taxi drivers, students, and street artists. "This place?" Thomas asked, raising an eyebrow. "Trust me, these tacos can cure a broken heart." He took a bite and coughed, caught off guard by the heat. "This should come with a warning. See? That's life. Spicy, unpredictable, and sometimes it makes you cry in traffic." They both laughed, and Thomas wiped his mouth with a paper napkin. "Can I ask you something?" "You can try. Do you ever imagine living somewhere else?" Alice frowned. "Like outside Queens?" "Outside New York. Maybe even outside the U.S." "Wow, that was specific. Just curious." She paused for a moment. "I used to dream about that. But I've also learned that home isn't a zip code. It's where you can be yourself without needing to apologize." Thomas nodded, thoughtful. "And you?" she asked. "I've lived in 6 different cities, 3 countries, and none of them compared to the moment I stepped into your kitchen and saw a pot of brigadeiro on the stove." Alice smiled, a little shy. "You're really getting good at saying the right things at the right time." "I'm just being honest." They finished lunch with more juice and fewer defenses. On the way back to the building, he walked her to the subway. "You sure you don't want me to drive you?" "I'm sure. Today I want to go home alone, get my thoughts in order, and my heart too." He understood. "So, see you tomorrow?" "Tomorrow's Saturday." "I know." She raised an eyebrow but didn't answer. She just walked down the subway steps with a smile on her face. That night, Alice stayed up late, sitting on the couch with her grandmother and Camila, watching an old movie and debating what is and isn't love. "Love is when someone knows your flaws and still chooses to stay," said her grandmother. "Love is when you give up the last slice of pizza," said Camila. Alice laughed. "Love is when you feel like you can be silly and the person won't leave." They looked at each other and laughed together. The next morning, Thomas showed up unannounced. He had a paper bag in hand and an expression that looked anxious. "I brought muffins, baked by me, or at least supervised by me. Is this an apology or an attempted poisoning? Depends on your taste." They went upstairs and had coffee together, this time with Alice's grandmother officially present. She already seemed to like him. "And what is it that you do for work?" she asked. "Business. Lots of paperwork. Not much excitement. But now, with Alice, things feel different." She smiled, clearly pleased. Later, when they were alone on the porch, Thomas approached her carefully. "Alice, can I ask you something a bit more serious?" "Good start. You even used the word serious." "I like you, not in a vague or distracted way. I really like you, and I want to try this, if you want that too." Alice took a deep breath. "You know my world's pretty different from yours, right? And you know I'm tired of my world, right? It won't be easy, it won't be light. But it can be real." She looked at him closely, weighing every word, every intention. "All right then, let's give it a try. But on one condition." "What's that?" "No flowers every week. If you want to impress me, bring cheese bread." "Deal." They laughed, and the kiss happened without any planning. It was slow, tender, but full of everything they'd avoided for weeks. The following Monday, the New Start Foundation was officially launched. The event took place in a renovated warehouse in Queens, decorated with simple lights, panels telling stories of women entrepreneurs, and a table full of sweets made by Alice. Thomas gave the opening speech, but it was Alice who truly charmed the crowd. "I started selling coffee, scared I wouldn't make rent. Now I'm here, helping other women not give up on their dreams. And that was only possible because someone who I thought was just a grumpy CEO believed in me before I believed in myself." The audience gave her a standing ovation, and from the back of the room Thomas's mother watched, her expression unreadable. Hours later, she walked up to Alice holding a glass in her hand. "So it's you again, the one who hit my son's car, and apparently his heart too?" Alice braced for impact. "Yes, ma'am. I still find all of this unlikely, I'll admit, but he's smiling. I haven't seen that in years." Alice didn't know what to say. "Just take care of him. He's more fragile than he looks. And I'm stronger than I look." The woman nodded, and for the first time she walked away without bitterness. That night, Alice and Thomas stayed until the last guest had left. Alone in the center of the warehouse, with the lights off and the smell of coffee still in the air, he held her close. "You changed my life," he whispered, "and you reminded me it's worth taking risks." They kissed again, knowing that now what brought them together wasn't a contract or a car accident. It was a choice, a feeling, love. The week after the launch of the New Start Foundation, things began to shift in deeper ways than Alice had expected. The project was running full speed ahead, yes, but it was what was happening outside the spreadsheets that kept her up at night. Thomas was just as kind as ever, but now there was something more in the way he looked at her. A deeper care, an attention that went beyond the professional. And even though her heart beat a little faster, Alice also felt the weight of all the things they hadn't said yet. That's why, when he invited her to spend a weekend out of town, she hesitated. "It's just a quick retreat with investors," he explained. "But there'll be a welcome dinner, and I thought maybe you'd want to come with me." "Thomas, I don't have clothes for that kind of event." "That's easy to fix. A company card can solve that. Or you could wear your famous dark blue dress. I like that one." "It's not just about clothes." He got it right away. "You're afraid of being judged again."
"I survived your mother, but I still remember the way she looked at me, like I was an accident that shouldn't have happened." "You're not an accident, Alice. Not in my life, and not in this project." She looked away, but after a few seconds she said, "All right. I'll go, but on one condition." "Another one?" "You have to promise that if I trip and spill red wine on someone, you'll pretend it was part of a performance art flash mob." "Deal." On Saturday, Alice packed a small bag and left Camila and her grandmother in charge of the house, with handwritten notes and carefully labeled frozen meals. The black car pulled up in front of her building right at 9 a.m. Thomas got out, wearing a light blazer and sunglasses. He looked like he'd stepped out of a fancy cologne ad. Alice, on the other hand, wore dark jeans and a cream blouse that she kept tugging down every 3 minutes. "Does this look okay?" she asked as soon as he opened the car door for her. "It looks better than okay. It's you, and that's what matters." The drive to the resort was filled with light conversation, spontaneous laughter, and comfortable silence. Alice shared stories from the cafe, eccentric customers, delivery mix-ups, while Thomas admitted that his worst nightmare was being forced to network with people who talked about percentages over dinner. "I don't think you were born to be a CEO," she said, amused. "I think I became a CEO to hide from the rest." "From what?" "From my own mess." They arrived around noon. The resort was tucked away, surrounded by trees, with a view of the lake. There was a golf course, a spa area, and a large glass hall where the evening dinner would take place. Alice felt out of place the moment she stepped into the lobby. Everything was too white, too quiet, too fragrant. "This place makes me feel like if I sneeze, someone will find me," she whispered to Thomas. "Relax. Most of the people here only seem fancy because they're afraid of being found out." In the room reserved for her, a long dress was hanging in the closet. Deep burgundy, simple yet elegant. Alice's eyes widened. "Did you have this arranged?" "No," Becky did, "but I approved." Actually, I lost the vote. She wanted something with more sparkle. Said, you don't need to compete with anyone, just shine. I'll pretend that didn't move me, she said, trying to hide her smile. Later, walking into the hall with Thomas at her side, Alice felt every eye turn toward them. Some curious, others with that quiet judgment she knew all too well. She held onto his arm and whispered, what if I fall? Then I'll fall too. We'll make the headlines, CEO and guest faint from love and wine. She laughed and suddenly it was easier to breathe.
During dinner, Thomas introduced Alice to some investors with ease. No formal speeches, no awkwardness. He spoke of her like part of the team, not as a guest. When he talked about the foundation, he made sure to say the idea came from her and that he had only believed in the project. At one point, a man with graying hair approached and said with a slightly crooked smile, "So, you're the famous Alice, the girl who became a fund director after crashing into the boss's car." Alice smiled, unshaken. "Imagine what I could do if I crashed into a helicopter." Thomas nearly choked on his wine. The man let out a forced laugh and walked away. "You're amazing," Thomas said, laughing. "You clearly don't care about your reputation. I care more about the truth. And in this case, the girl holding her glass in her left hand so she doesn't smudge her bracelet." "Technical details," she said, smiling. The rest of the night passed with an unexpectedly light mood. They danced once, awkwardly, clumsily, with Thomas missing the rhythm and Alice laughing so hard she almost lost a heel. But no one seemed to care, or if they did, they hid it well. Back in the room, Alice still felt her cheeks flushed. "That was more fun than I expected." "I promised it would be easy," Thomas said. "And you're keeping promises. That's dangerous." He looked at her. "Want to know what's even more dangerous?" "What?" "Falling for you. A little more each day, wet 'em." Alice looked down, bit the corner of her lip, and finally replied, "Then I guess we're even." That night, they slept in separate rooms, but their hearts had never been closer. Yes, there was desire, but also respect, affection, and care for each other's pace. The next morning, they walked together to the lake. The sun was just coming up, and the air smelled of damp earth and fresh leaves. "Have you ever thought about getting married someday?" Alice asked, out of nowhere. Thomas didn't hide his surprise. "I've thought about it, but I always saw it as contracts and obligations, until I met you." She looked at him, curious. "And now?" "Now it feels simpler, like signing a blank agreement, just built on trust." Alice laughed. "You really have a gift for turning everything into CEO talk. Blame the corporate trauma, but I'm in recovery." They stayed quiet for a while, until Alice said, "I'm afraid of becoming just another story that started out different, but ended like all the others." Thomas took her hand. "Then let's write our own story all the way through, page by page. No rush, but no running either." She nodded, still not sure how to handle it all. But for some reason, for the first time in years, she felt like she could just try. "Let's play a little game for those who only read the comments." Type coffee in the comments. Only the ones who got this far will understand. Now let's keep the story going. On the way back to New York, the silence in the car felt different. It wasn't awkward. It was understanding. "Next week we have the second round of interviews with the entrepreneurs, remember?" Thomas said, already halfway there. "I remember, and I've gone over the questions 3 times. You're amazing, you know that?" "No, but thank you for reminding me." It was late afternoon when they reached her neighborhood. As she got out of the car, Alice paused for a second before entering the building. "Thomas?" "Yes?" "You don't need to convince me of anything." "What do you mean?" "You don't need to prove you love me. I already know." He didn't answer with words. He just looked at her in a way that said everything, and more. After she went inside, Thomas stood there for a few minutes, looking at the entrance of the building as if it were a starting point. And maybe, in a way, it was. On the other side of the door, Alice leaned against the hallway wall and smiled to herself. Yes, she was afraid. But now she was also in love. And for the first time, willing to really live it. No breaks, no doubts, no holding back. The weekend had been magical, but Alice knew, as she always had, that real life doesn't take holidays, and love stories don't get special treatment. On Monday, when she arrived at the headquarters of the New Beginnings Foundation, the reception area was busier than usual. And the looks, well, they were different now. Curious. People whispered and smiled as she walked by. "Looks like Director Alice came back from her trip with the CEO," murmured one of the assistants, not even trying to hide the tone in her voice. Alice pretended not to hear, but inside she felt the weight of the judgment she had always feared. In the elevator, she ran into Becky, who hugged her warmly. "Don't worry, they'll talk about it today. Tomorrow, they'll move on." I didn't even say anything. But they have eyes and social media. You were tagged in 3 photos from that gala dinner, smiling, standing next to Thomas, and wearing a dress worth more than my rent. It was borrowed, and that pose wasn't on purpose. I tripped and fell into his arm. Becky laughed out loud, and I bet he didn't mind one bit. In the office, Thomas had his head buried in reports. When he saw her, he looked up and smiled, that small, quiet smile that said so much. "Good morning." "Morning, charming CEO, ready to handle some corporate gossip?" "Always. My secret is to ignore it with style." Ah, the classic no-comment approach. Exactly. Alice sat at the meeting table, but the air felt heavy. She knew something else was coming, and it did. Thomas closed his laptop, crossed his arms, and spoke seriously. "We need to talk." 3 words that chill any romance. "About what?" "About the board. They found out about our trip and they're not happy." Alice's stomach turned. "Why?" "Because they're paranoid. They think I'm mixing my personal life with business, and now they want to review the foundation project." "The project they already approved?" "The same one. They're claiming it was approved based on emotion, not on data." Alice stood up, outraged. "That's ridiculous." "I know, but the corporate world loves a scandal, even if they have to make one up." "So what are you going to do?" "Fight. I'll defend every line, every proposal, every action you've taken." "But Alice," he hesitated. "The pressure might get worse. They might try to remove you from the position." She sat back down, this time slowly, trying to process the blow. "I won't back down," she said firmly. "If they want to see professionalism, they'll get it. And if they want to fight, I'll bring coffee and courage." Thomas smiled, proud. But there was something else in his eyes. Worry. That week, the meetings with the board intensified. Alice spent hours redoing spreadsheets, defending reports, and proving with hard data what was already clear in the foundation's social impact. At home, her sister Camila noticed something had changed. "You seem different. More serious. More tired." "Growing up is hard work. So is loving someone, right?" Alice stopped chopping vegetables. "What are you trying to say?" "That you and Thomas have something, but it's like you're always afraid to really be happy." Alice stayed quiet for a moment. "I just don't want to rely on that to feel complete." "But you already are complete, and maybe that's exactly why he likes you so much." On Thursday, while going over reports at the foundation, Alice received an anonymous email with the subject line, "Do you really know who Thomas Fisher is?" The contents were worse than she expected. Leaked documents, old messages, and a list of businesses closed by his strategic decisions that hurt small shop owners. In some, employees were laid off in large numbers. In others, there were lawsuits. Nothing illegal, but everything. Cold, corporate, impersonal. Alice felt a tightness in her chest. This wasn't the Thomas she knew, but she couldn't just ignore it. At the end of the workday, she walked into his office without knocking. "We need to talk." "About what?" "About the companies you shut down. The jobs that were lost." Thomas slowly closed his laptop. "I figured this would come up." "And you didn't think you should tell me?" "I thought you already knew my past wasn't exactly clean. I was the kind of CEO who followed numbers, and only numbers. That's how I was trained, to cut where it hurts, as long as it didn't bleed on paper. And now? Now, I'm trying to fix it. With you, with the project, with every woman who finds a chance in this foundation to no longer depend on anyone." Alice didn't respond right away. She was still processing. "Have you changed?" "I'm trying, and maybe part of that change is because you came into my life." She sat down across from him, still feeling uneasy. "I don't need a perfect man. I just need someone brave enough to be real. Then I'm your guy, full of mistakes, but no desire to repeat any of them." That night, Alice went home deep in thought. She lay down on the couch and turned on the TV just for some background noise. But her mind was racing. This was the moment of truth. She could either choose to love an imperfect man who was willing, or stay alone, afraid of losing herself. On Friday, Before the big meeting with the board, Alice put together a presentation with photos, videos, and testimonials from women impacted by the project. She asked Thomas to sit among the board members, just as a listener. "Today I'll speak. On my own." And she did. With strength, honesty, and emotion. This project wasn't born in a boardroom. It started with a coffee cart, late bills, and dreams crushed by lack of opportunity. It came from women who fight every day with what little they have. There was silence. Some hard expressions began to soften. "And if your concern is my relationship with Thomas Fisher, know this. He's never given me anything but support. Everything you've seen here is mine. Because I've lived every one of these women's stories, I know what I'm talking about." At the end of the presentation, no one dared to argue. As she walked out, Thomas was waiting for her in the hallway. He didn't say a word, he just hugged her tightly. "You were brilliant. You were quiet. Was that hard? Yes, but it was necessary." By the end of the day, an official email went out to the board. The Recomesso Foundation would remain active, with Alice as director and Thomas stepping back from direct oversight to avoid conflicts of interest. "Does that hurt your position?" she asked. "Only if you leave me," he replied with a smile. Alice felt a lump in her throat. The fight had been tough, but it had been worth it. That night, as they reached her neighborhood, Alice stopped at the gate and said, out of the blue, "Thomas? Yes? Do you still want to write this story with me? More than anything." She smiled. "Then let's keep going. But this time, let's write our own chapters, not someone else's." And that night's kiss wasn't a goodbye. It was a promise. Life, even after so many twists and turns, seemed determined to test Alice's patience. The days after the big meeting were intense, but there was a strange calm in the middle of the chaos. The Recomesso Foundation stayed strong. The women supported by the project kept growing their ideas, testimonials kept coming in, and suddenly, Alice found herself in the role of mentor, advisor, and inspiration. She still wasn't used to that. Being an inspiration was scary, especially for someone who not long ago was tripping over office rugs and spilling coffee on expensive suits. Thomas, on the other hand, respected the board's decision to step back, but stayed close in other ways. Home-cooked lunches, midday messages, bouquets of cheese bread. Yes, he found a Brazilian bakery in New Jersey just to surprise her. Deep down, Alice knew something was coming, but she had no idea it would be so grand. It was an ordinary afternoon, one of those when the New York sky looks like a faded watercolor. Alice was leaving the foundation carrying a box of documents when she saw a black car parked at the door. The window rolled down slowly, and Thomas appeared with a lazy smile. "Need a ride, director?" "Only if the driver sings Beyoncé the whole way. I charge extra for that." She got in the car laughing, but noticed something off. He seemed nervous, restless. "You okay?" "I am. I just thought we could do something different today." "Like what?" "Like dinner out, but really out, an hour away." "You kidnapped my stomach?" "I kidnapped all of you, but don't worry, it's for a good reason." Alice raised an eyebrow, suspicious, but she said yes. On the way, he played a playlist full of songs she loved, ones she was sure he didn't know. Most of them were her guilty pleasures. Cheesy classics, 90s ballads, even an acoustic version of My Heart Will Go On. "Okay, what's going on?" she asked as the car turned onto a tree-lined road with no cell towers in sight. "Trust me," he said, holding her hand. When they finally arrived, Alice blinked in disbelief. It was an old barn, restored into a cozy event space. String lights gave off a soft glow, flower petals lined the floor, floating candles lit the room, and soft music played in the background. "All this is for you," Thomas said, opening the car door and offering his hand. "Or rather, because of you." She walked with him to the center of the room. There, a small table was set for two, with candles and a friendly waiter who greeted them with a "Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Fisher," before disappearing quietly. Alice's eyes widened. "Mrs. Fisher?" "Spoiler," Thomas replied. Dinner was light, delicious, and romantic, but she had a feeling something was coming. And she was right. After dessert, Thomas stood up, pushed back his chair, and knelt down in front of her. Alice put her hand to her mouth, stunned. "Thomas, I promised I'd do this in a unique way. But you know me, I'm terrible with rehearsed speeches. So here it goes." He took a deep breath. "I met you in the worst possible way. Honking horns, flying coffee cups, and fear of the police. I thought you were a disaster. And I was right. She raised her eyebrows. But you were the kind of disaster my world needed. You messed up my routines, turned my office upside down, made me taste cupcakes that cost me million-dollar deals because I couldn't stop thinking about sugar. And worst of all, you made me feel. He pulled out a small box, inside a simple ring with a small blue stone, the exact color of the dress she wore at their first event together. Alice Oliveira, will you be the CEO of my heart, the CFO of my smiles, the lifetime president of my days? Will you marry me? She laughed through tears. That was the most ridiculous and perfect proposal I've ever heard. Is that a yes? Of course it's a yes, she shouted, hugging him. As they kissed, the lights brightened, and a group of friends and foundation staff appeared, clapping and cheering. Becky was there, filming everything while crying. This is going to blow up on the company's Instagram, she yelled. Camila and Alice's grandmother were there too. The older woman quietly wiped her tears with a handkerchief. And to top it off, a taco food truck pulled into the parking lot. In honor of our first romantic lunch, Thomas explained with a smile. The wedding took place in a garden just outside New York. Nothing grand, but everything felt like Alice. Wildflowers, an altar decorated with dried leaves, and photos of the women from the Recomesso Foundation scattered across the tables. Instead of gifts, guests brought donations for women's entrepreneurship projects. Thomas wore a light-colored suit. Alice wore a flowing dress with a vintage touch. Her bouquet had no roses, just lavender and sprigs of rosemary. At the entrance, a sign read, "From coffee to the altar, our story had flavor and courage." Becky was the officiant. Of course, she insisted. We're gathered here not to talk about profits or balance sheets, but to celebrate a long-term investment. Love, she said, drawing laughter. As Alice walked toward Thomas, her eyes sparkled brightly. No doubt, no fear. Are you sure you don't want to run away right now? He whispered playfully. Only if it's with you, forever. They exchanged vows that even made the waiters cry. Thomas spoke about learning to feel, to listen, to let go. Alice spoke about learning to trust, to open up, to love without fear. When they were declared husband and wife, guests tossed coffee beans in the air. Becky's idea, of course, and the band played an acoustic version of Can't Help Falling in Love. The reception was simple, full of laughter, clumsy dancing, funny videos, and cupcakes with signs that read, "A sweet new beginning." At the end of the night, while dancing alone in the garden with the last guests leaving and the sky full of stars, Thomas looked at Alice and said, "I love you." With all the spreadsheets and surprises, and I love you, with all the stumbles and spilled coffee. They kissed, knowing that this story, the one that started with an accident, was never a mistake, it was fate. And there, among laughter, dancing, and love, they lived the first day of the rest of their lives. Together. What did you think of Thomas and Alice's story? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, what rating would you give this story? Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our stories. And take a moment to check out more heartfelt stories by clicking right here on the end screen.